In our last class, we talked about political economy theory that talks about this idea that um, those who who have economic power and those people who are economically powerful, if they control social institutions, one can see its effects on artifacts, so media artifacts importantly. And we talked about this idea in the context of political talk shows in Pakistan. Today we are going to talk about another theory which was introduced by Marshall McLuhan. I'll talk about this person in a minute. And many times this theory is referred as media determinism. This is the name which is given to theory. Please turn on your cameras. Ghazal, Maham, Amna. Amna has an excuse. Misha, Hasib. Please turn on your cameras. Umar Riaz as well. Ghazal, I cannot see you better. It's better if you turn on the light.
I am about to.
All right, let's move on to my next slide. Marshall McLuhan, before I begin my discussion on McLuhan, I would like to ask you two questions. My first question is anyone familiar with this name, Marshall McLuhan? And these are two terms that he coined. He is mainly known for these ideas that he came up with. The first idea is the medium is the message or massage, and the second idea is global village. Has anyone ever heard about this idea, global village?
Yes,
I am
ma'am.
sure you have.
Yes,
Okay, Arbaz has heard about it. Misha also has heard about it. Can you briefly talk about your understanding, even if it is vague? Vague, I mean, it means you do not have really neat, clean idea in your mind. Global village seems to be more popular term than the first one. The medium is the message. So your understanding, your thoughts on that?
Ma'am, can I?
Gigi, go ahead, bete.
Ma'am, it is basically an idea of the boundaries becoming vague gradually but through internet and the globalization of the world, and the world becoming of a single country, and people coming closer and closer through this idea of boundaries getting vague through internet and other social media platforms.
Shabash, very good. First thing that Misha said is related to the idea of boundaries becoming vague. And I believe what she means by that is that boundaries are erasing and the world is taking the shape of a country. That's what Misha said. Hasib or Arbaz, either of you also said that you are also familiar with the term global village. I would like you to talk about your understanding too.
यस मैम, ग्लोबल विलेज यही होता है कि अब हम इतने जो हैं टेक्नोलॉजी के ज़रिए या मीडिया के ज़रिए इतने इंटरकनेक्टेड हो चुके हैं कि हम सब एक ही जैसे मुल्कों में रहते हुए भी एक ही विलेज का हिस्सा हो। जैसे ये दुबई में बेसिकली कॉन्सेप्ट होता है जहाँ पे वो ग्लोबल विलेज का, जहाँ सारे मुल्क आते हैं, वो अपना अपना जो है ना उनका पेविलियन टाइप होता है। वो ये दिखाते हैं कि मीडिया के थ्रू जो है हम सारे बहुत ज़्यादा कनेक्टेड हो चुके हैं, और जैसे मीशा ने कहा कि बाउंड्रीज जो हैं वो ख़त्म हो चुकी हैं, हम सारे एक साथ आ चुके हैं।
Yeah, boundaries are erasing and they are becoming, they are disappearing. Now just raise your hands that how many of you were familiar with this term global village, even if you did not have any understanding. That's okay. Just I'm only trying to have an idea that how many of you knew. Abdullah knew the term. Hasib also had heard about the term. Heather had heard about the term. Ghazal, did you ever hear about this term? It's a very famous term, global village.
Yes, ma'am.
Also familiar. I'm sure Amna and Maham were also familiar. How about you, Umar?
No, ma'am.
You have never heard about it. Zahra and Rohama, please turn on your cameras. And this is something that these are the protocols for this class that everyone has to observe. And please do not let me waste my time repeating myself after every minute requesting you to turn on your cameras. Maham, turn on your camera, please. And all the rest of you who haven't turned on cameras, please turn your cameras on. All right. So this explains that although we were not familiar with this person, Marshall McLuhan, this man, this scholar, many of us still know the term global village. It's a very famous term and it gained popularity in this new millennium. I'll talk about that shortly in the coming slides. Why did it become popular? Marshall McLuhan is mainly known for promoting the idea on global village. With that, he also proclaimed an idea, which is the medium is the message or massage. They also use a word massage. We will talk about that in a minute. Let me go to my other slide and I'll come back to this then. This is, in this screen, you see the picture of the man who proposed the idea. All right. So this is the picture of the man who proposed the idea global village. This is him, Marshall McLuhan, the man who coined the term global village even before the internet invention. Let me tell you an interesting fact here. Marshall McLuhan died in 1980. And he was a Canadian scholar. He also studied at University of Cambridge. And he was a professor of English. With that, he was also a scholar of literary criticism, which means he would offer criticism on literary artifacts. He passed away in 1980. However, the term is becoming popular in new century, and when we came to the new millennium. And this is an interesting fact about him. When did they invent internet? Can anyone recall? When was internet invented?
1960s, ma'am.
60s? Are you sure?
After World War II, 50 से 60 के दरमियान शायद.
Hasib, I'm not talking about TV or radio. I'm talking about internet, the worldwide.
1990s.
Well, 2090s mein.
Very good. Ghazal said 1990s. Very good. Yes. Internet was invented by an Irish software engineer. His name was Tim Berners-Lee. I'll write his name in the chat box. You can further search him up if you want. Tim Berners-Lee. He was an Irish software engineer. Ghazal was absolutely correct. Internet was invented in 1990s. That was the period when Lee thought that there can be a world wide web, www, through which the whole world could stay connected. Now, how is it that a man, he passes away, McLuhan, he passed away in 1980, and internet is being invented after his death, but he kind of foresaw what was coming ahead. So he died in 1980, of course, and before that, TV was on boom. TV was a popular media, and TV was a media that did not offer us only printed messages, but also visual messages. I mean, we can find visual messages in print media as well, but in television, you actually find a world, a two-dimensional world. You see people moving, you see people talking, you can hear them speaking and all that. So he proposed the term global village, and he proposed the idea that because of these inventions, and especially inventions related to electronic media, the world is taking the shape of a village. Like Misha earlier said, that a faster communication, faster transportation actually gives us the shape of a village. A village is a small place where people are connected to each other. It is easy for them to stay connected. If anything happens in any part of the village, people living in other part of the village come to know about it really quick. And the internet has actually, and not, electronic media has actually brought us to this stage when the world has taken the shape of a village, global village. A village, like the two terms global and village, they appear to be contradictory, right? Village apparently refers to a small area, a small territory, and global is something which is worldwide. So the two ideas apparently do not go with each other, but when he proposed the idea global village, he meant that the world is actually becoming more connected and tied because of inventions in technology. So he was in a way studying technology. When he proposed the idea of global village, his idea did not get much fame. However, soon after internet was invented, the idea of global village came up again, and posthumously. What do I mean by posthumously? Can anyone tell? Posthumous means like McLuhan was dead. McLuhan had already died by that time. After his death, the term global village was revived again, and scholars turned their attentions to the work, to his works, to the works that McLuhan wrote. And they were of the view that yes, internet really has brought us to a stage where we can say that world is now a village. And soon after 9/11 happened, we almost all of us saw what happened at the World Trade Center on our television screens. Now imagine something, an incident, an event that was happening miles away, literally on another continent, but people here were able to see what was happening there. A few months ago, they had Olympics, which is a sports event, and they had them in Tokyo, which is a city of Japan. And those of us who are interested in sports, I mean, I don't think if any of us went to Tokyo to see the events, but we were able to see the events unfolding on our TV screens. Even if not on TV screens, we read about them in the newspapers. We saw videos on YouTube screens, and we also got information through social media. So this is what he wanted to say. The interesting fact to repeat was that he died before the invention of internet, and he proposed this idea of global village before the invention of internet, but the concept was sped up after the invention of internet. I will stop here to let you share your comments and arguments if you have any. And those of you who have not turned on their cameras, I will not be doing their attendance. Misha, you raise your hand. Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am, I have a question. That he proposed this term even before internet was there. So how, I mean, on what basis did he say that the world would become a global village, since you just told that there was no internet when he proposed this term?
It's a very good question. There was no internet, but still there was a boom of TV. TV was a really popular media when he proposed this term. And the idea of cable and dish antennas, I mean, that was all still very popular. And not only TV, he was also considering other means of electronic communication, like printing presses that made the sharing of copies, physical copies of book faster, telephone, and means of transportation. He was a kind of scholar who was impressed with technology, and because of speedy transformation happening in our social lives. Because of technology, he came up with the term global village. And he was of the view that if electronic media especially keeps growing with the same pace, ultimately world is going to take the shape of a global village. Although by the time he died, internet, they had not invented internet, but we did see that we did see world taking the shape of global village. His ideas became more popular after his death. I mean, world was already like a global village back in 1980s. That's why I asked you about the date of internet invention. Internet was invented in late 90s, I believe, and the idea global village, it gained popularity in the new millennium, when the new century started. Any further question, Misha?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Zara and Rohama, Heather, anything else?
No, ma'am, thank you.
All right. This was McLuhan, and this is another Canadian scholar. To repeat, McLuhan was a Canadian scholar. He did teach in the US for a while, but I believe for the most part of his life, he taught at the University of Toronto. He is another professor. His name is Harold Innis. I wrote his last name here, but I would like to write his full name in the chat box. Let me go there. This was Harold Innis. McLuhan was influenced by Innis' works, Harold Innis. This is very interesting to see how scholars influence each other. If you ask me, all of us are influenced by writers, by authors in our lives. If even I can ask you the same question. If I ask you, who has influenced you, or whose work has influenced you, or if I ask you this question, that what book are you impressed with, or who has influenced you as an author, maybe you can come up with answers. When I was little, my famous writer was A. Hamid. I grew up reading A. Hamid. I have maybe I have talked about this earlier, but Nawai Waqt was my family newspaper. My grandfather used to read it, and then my father would read it. So every Sunday we'll get Sunday magazine. I mean, every Sunday they would send a Sunday magazine copy of magazine with the newspaper, and A. Hamid would write there. I remember reading many fantasy-based stories of A. Hamid. He's a famous Urdu writer. I used to write. I used to read his Ganga ke Pujari Nag and Veran Haveli Ka Aseb, and all of these kind of fiction-based narratives. They were really, really interesting. So when I was little, A. Hamid influenced me the most. And in my as a communication scholar, I am influenced by Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall is the one who has deeply influenced me. I can ask you the same question. So let's say if I ask this question, Arbaz, if I ask you the same question, who has influenced you as an author in your life? Like, what author would you like to read more, and what do you think, who has deeply influenced you, whose writings?
मैम आई लाइक पोइट्री वेरी मच, तो मुझे फिर उस तरह से जो है ना शायर वगैरह और उनकी राइटिंग जो है वो बहुत पसंद है, जैसे अहमद फराज हो गया, या फिर आप जॉन एलिया हो गया, या तहजीब हाफी। इन लोगों की मुझे जो है ना राइटिंग बहुत पसंद है।
But I sometimes I also like reading that kind of content. Similarly, if I ask you this question, if I ask this question from Heather, how would you respond to it, Heather? Who has influenced you as an author?
Ma'am, Paulo Coelho.
Paulo Coelho. I have read only his, two books. His The Alchemist is good. I have read his 11 Minutes as well. I'm sure you have read more than me, but I didn't find him as good as he was in The Alchemist. How about you,
Yes,
Haseem?
ma'am.
Who has influenced you as an author?
Ma'am, there are different authors in different categories. For example, in newspaper, मलीहा लोधी के articles. अगर उर्दू में बात करें तो ज़िया शाहिद की किताबें, और उसके बाद अगर इंग्लिश में जाएं तो यास्मीन मुजाहिद. ये तीन जो हैं वो ज़्यादा इन्फ्लुएंस करते हैं. मैं ज़्यादा इन्हीं को पढ़ता हूँ.
Very
And I
good.
have multiple books of them in my room even.
Yeah, very good. I'm glad to see that you have a lot to talk about when I asked you this question, because when I asked the same question in my other class in last semester, students had trouble recalling what authors they had read. And I mean, there was a student who couldn't think of a single author in his life that he had read. So it's very impressive. Can I ask you the same question, Ghazal? Who has influenced you in writing?
Ma'am, I do not really read books or anything. I only read poetry. तो मैं सिर्फ poets का बता सकता हूँ.
Sure.
मैम गालिब, फराज, जॉन एलिया, मुनीर नियाजी,
These are
Mohsin
very
Naqvi.
heavy names. These are all very heavy names, and I am impressed that you have read Ghalib. मैंने पूरा Ghalib कभी भी नहीं पढ़ा. But
इतना ज़्यादा नहीं, लेकिन mostly the ghazals.
yeah, very good, very good. So scholars, they are influenced by other scholars, and they also influence other scholars coming in line. McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan, this guy that I showed you earlier, this guy was deeply influenced by this person who also taught at University of Toronto, and his name was Harold Innis. And this person, he's famous for his book. I'll write the name of the book in the chat box. All right, that's the name of his book. The Bias of Communication. This book was, this scholar was a political economic theorist. The same theory that we learned and discussed in our last class. He is a political economy theorist, Harold Innis. And as you can see from the title of his book, The Bias of Communication, he was of the view that technology, and especially media related technology, it has a tendency to promote control. So let me explain this further. Harold Innis, he believed, since he was a political economy theorist, he believed that those who control the technology, they have the tendency and capacity to control masses as well. So he gave the example of writing. He said that ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome and Egypt, they were able to exercise the Egyptians. I mean, they were once very powerful. And if we read the history of ancient civilizations, Egyptians, Romans, Greeks, they were all very powerful. He was of the view that people, those who own the means of communication, they can exercise power. That is why he proposed this title for his book, The Bias of Communication. In our contemporary world, in our modern times, how can we translate Innis' ideas? It can be translated in the sense that, let's say, those who control means of communication or technology, they can control. Let's say Hollywood. they were powerful because they owned latest means of technology. They owned latest technology and means of communication. And for a considerable time, Hollywood exercised its power, and its not maybe power, exercised its domination on the whole world. And now we see the same idea happening with technology companies, tech giants. All these companies, since they own technology, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, since they own technology, this includes Apple and Google as well. They own technology, they have the power to exercise. They have the tendency to exercise their power. And this is why he suggested the title for his book, The Bias of Communication. He meant that the idea of communication is inherently biased. Those who have better means of communication will obviously have more dominance over others. So McLuhan was impressed with him. McLuhan drew his ideas from Innis, Harold Innis, but then he deviated. I explained the word deviated in my last class. Who would like to go over it again? And I have 9 minutes left for this class. When this session ends, you will come again so that I do your attendance and I take your questions as well. You will come again joining the same link. What do I mean by deviate? I explained this word in my last class. Ghazal, although you were not there, may I still ask you to explain what is the meaning of deviate here in the second sentence that you see on the screen? Heather just wrote move away from the normal.
Deviate का
जी बताइए.
deviate का वही सभी है तो ने लिखा है तो जैसे deviating from the topic या फिर the main argument आप किसी दूसरी direction में या distract हो जाए चले.
Very good. Digress. We use another word which is digress. So although McLuhan was deeply influenced by political economy theorists, however, in his ideas, he deviated a little. And let's see how he deviated. He was not much worried about control and elites and power and hegemony. He asked this question: was it possible that media could transform our sensory experiences as well as our social order? When he says media, he is specifically talking about electronic media. So this was his question. Let me explain his question in simpler words. That can electronic media transform our social order? Our sensory experiences? Yes, media sensory means something that is related to our senses. Now, let me ask you a question. Okay, and answer this question with reasoning. Which media type you will find more pleasing to your senses? Number one is a picture where you see a man playing with a ball. Number two is you see a video in which you see a man standing in the ground playing with the ball. So number one or number two, which message seems more appealing to your senses?
Number two, ma'am.
Number two, of course, number two. That's what he meant. That media transforms our sensory experiences, the way we see media, the way we experience media and our social order. Electronic media can also change our social order. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, I'll talk about social order here. When I talk about his proclamation, the medium is the message. One of important proclamations of McLuhan. By proclamation, the word proclamation comes from proclaim. Arbaz, do you remember I have explained this word proclaim many times in class? What is the meaning of proclaim?
मैम प्रोक्लेम होता है ना कि किस चीज को मान लेना मेरे ख्याल से.
Umar, any idea? Rohama, otherwise you can go. Ji Umar.
मैम किसी चीज को मैम मान लेना मैम.
Ruhama, what did you say?
Acceptance, maybe.
No. Okay.
मैम टू टेल अबाउट जिस तरह ऐलान करना, टू टेल अबाउट बताना, evidently.
Very good. The word proclamation comes from another word, proclaim. In Urdu, we explain it with the word dawa karna, proclamation. So that's what McLuhan proclaimed. The medium is the message and the massage. Medium, okay, I'll go back to my previous slide. Here I was talking about social order. Now, media changes our social order. It's the media that is more important, not the content. Now, let me explain this with an example. It happened yesterday. Students, we will run out of time in 5 minutes. If we do not worry, come back using the same link. All right. It happened yesterday. Maybe you know, how many of you know that Walt Disney recently released a new animated movie? Its name is Encanto. I'll write it in the chat box. The creators of Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, recently this year in 2022 or 21, maybe in late 21, they released a new movie. Its name is Encanto. And my children badly wanted to see that movie. So we went to this shop. There was a famous shop in Main Market. Its name was Tansen. Maybe you are familiar. Tansen was a very famous, very famous CD shop. They were in this business for past 10 years now. I mean, my daughter is now 11 and I have been buying cartoon CDs for them since my children were born. So I went to Tansen because it's a movie. It's a very new movie. They just released it. It's not available on Netflix. I cannot find it anywhere. I went to buy a CD yesterday to that shop, Tansen. And I wasn't surprised because the CDs are now becoming old fashioned, but the shop has closed down. I didn't find the shop. I went to Rahman Tower and for about 15 minutes, I kept circling that area, asking everyone that if they are moved to another place. And I was told that they were moved to another place, but eventually I came to know that they had closed down the business. I was able to get their phone number. I called them and I asked them that you used to sell CDs and I have been looking for your shop and I want to buy this CD. And the owner of Tansen, he said that we have closed down our business because it had gone low. It wasn't giving us any profit. And we have started another business of medicine. And I asked him, from where can I buy the CD? And he said, we do not know, we have just closed the business. So I went to another shop. It's famous. Its name is Shahzad DVD. They are kind of chain. They have a branch in DHA and another on Moral Town Link Road. And I was able to find the link. Like you cannot buy a CD now. The circumstances are changed. You can either buy the link for the movie, or you can buy or you can bring a USB and you can get it. So this is how media, where am I? Sorry. Yeah, this is how media changes our social order, our surroundings, our especially electronic media. And this is what McLuhan is saying. He's saying it's the medium which is more important, not the message itself. Media actually determines what we are doing, how we are doing it. Earlier, people would get CDs. Today, people are getting subscriptions of Netflix, of Hulu, and many other channels. So media has changed. And he said that it's media which is more important because media changes our surroundings. The medium itself is the message. Or maybe massage. Massage is when we rub something. I mean, we get a massage of our hands or our feet when we are feeling tired. And here he meant to say the word massage here alludes to the term manipulate. It's the media that manipulates our thinking. It's the media that determines what we are doing. And this is what, so by this proclamation, by this idea, the claim, the medium is the message, McLuhan meant that it's technology that determines our experience. I'm ending this session now. Please come back and then we'll continue with the same discussion.